Hey guys, it's Corey from Redefining Strength, and today I wanted to talk about beginner variations of the deadlift. The deadlift can be one of those exercises that we feel we should do, but it can also be really scary, and a lot of times people have those horror stories about getting injured during the deadlift. So I wanted to go over some beginner modifications, because when we use the barbell especially, it's riskier than we really recognize. Because the bar can drift away, because we have to keep it close to our shins, that can be uncomfortable. People do tend to get it way out in front and then end up loading their lower back. So to prevent this, we can do some different techniques, we can use some different tools to make sure that we're not loading our lower backs, we're not getting injured, we're giving ourselves a safe way to really master the form. Because the deadlift is a must-do movement, okay? It's a hip hinge exercise, which means we're hinging at the hips to push our butt back. A lot of times what will happen is people will turn it into a squat, okay? And when they squat down, that pushes the barbell further away, or they'll keep their legs really straight and end up reaching out. Both of those compensations don't allow us to properly use our posterior chain, to use our hamstrings, to use our glutes, to use our back. Because our back is really working, especially our lats, to lock everything down as we brace our abs so that we can use our glutes to drive up, so we can use our hamstrings to drive up. So while the barbell might be a variation you really love to use, even as a trainer, you want to try and use it with your clients, you have to recognize that because of the way the bar loads everything down, because of the fact that it has to be right up against the shins, it can be a more difficult technique to master. So one of the best ways to regress that basic movement, if someone is ready for load, if they've mastered the basic hip hinge, is to use a kettlebell. Because with a kettlebell, what you can simply do is have someone place it back between their feet. There's nothing against their shins to sort of allow them to push it away out of self-preservation so they don't drag it up their shins. They can place the kettlebell back, which helps them properly sit back versus leaning forward at all. Okay, so they can hinge at the hips. You can even start them with a slightly straighter leg variation over even a conventional, because that can be easier to not confuse it with the squat as well. But if you hinge at the hips, the kettlebell is back, you engage your back, you can then lift up, squeezing your butt, and then you have that visual even of setting it back towards your heels as you hinge over. That prevents you from loading your lower back and letting the kettlebell drift away. It also can help you keep those knees soft as you push your butt back. Another great cue if someone isn't ready for, say, a weight, or even if they are but they sort of need an extra visual, is placing a wall behind them. Because if they are doing this lean forward thing and they're letting their weight come forward, having that wall back behind them where they actually have to think about pushing their butt back into the wall can be super, super helpful. When they do the kettlebell as well to help with that posterior loading and even help them keep wide shoulders, you can even change the loading placement. By placing the kettlebell back behind them, as they hinge over, they have to keep their knees soft to help them balance. It helps them keep their shoulders wide and push their butt back, and then they can squeeze their butt as they come back. But loading behind can also be a nice way to modify the movement and help them build up. And of course, using the kettlebell, you can then go into more conventional, so slightly more knee bend with the kettlebell back. You can also teach sumo. But having that kettlebell that you can set back or even posteriorly load really helps them make sure that their weight is shifting the right way, because we want to make sure that we're loading that posterior chain. If someone really struggles as well to load their glutes, what you might find is they need to work on an actual hip hinge movement, and using the band can be a great way to teach that. Because they can step inside, or if you have a cable machine or even just resistance bands, they can hold it between their legs. But because the band is at their hips, if they do have any upper body problems, maybe too much thoracic grounding, so it's sort of one of those things that you don't feel safe doing the deadlift with them, you can still work on that hip hinge movement pattern to help them build up. Because the band will pull them back, they can slightly soften the knees, keeping their back flat, and then they can squeeze their butt to come forward. Depending on their glute engagement, anterior pelvic tilt, you can use a little bit of thoracic rounding when you do this, because that will help really engage their abs. But you're driving the ground away to squeeze your butt as you're pushing into the band, almost as if you're gonna jump forward. And that nice little hip hinge can help them really isolate and activate those glutes. So it can help be a great accessory exercise even for someone who has mastered the deadlift, and it can be a great way to help them really ingrain that hip hinge movement pattern. A lot of times with beginners, we also want to go to that single leg deadlift, especially if our beginners are runners or doing something where they really need to build that unilateral strength. Maybe they even have imbalances we want to correct. But when you do that single leg deadlift, it requires a lot of balance. So one way, we modify is we put a hand up on something, we have a little balance assist, you can use a roller. I also really like the slider variation, because this allows you to add a little bit more load. It allows you to properly cue them to sit back, but it gives them that stability without really using that other leg. They can also do an 80-20 variation where they have just one toe sort of touching down as they hip hinge, because this gives them a more unilateral focus to sit back. So you're sort of mimicking that single leg deadlift without having all of the balance challenge of the full single leg deadlift. So when you're doing the different deadlift variations, you want to think about how can you help this person, or how can you help yourself master that hip hinge exercise? How can you help yourself feel your hamstrings, your glutes, your abs working without your lower back taking over, okay? It is a posterior chain exercise, it is working your entire backside, but you don't want your lower back to be the only thing you felt because it was compensating for those other muscles. So by modifying, using different placements with the weights, even using that little balance assist if you are going to do a unilateral movement to help correct imbalances, can be really key. If you like the video, make sure to like it, comment below if you have any questions, and subscribe. We're posting new videos each week. And if you want more help either coaching the deadlift or training yourself with the deadlift, check out my new Mastery Series Deadlift Edition. The link is in the video description.